to run it?
Yeah, that'd be fine if anybody, yeah, has anything to say while you go along, while it's fresh in mind. If that suits you best, James, if that's how you like to work, that'll be fine.
Yeah, that's good. Keeps it a bit more real, doesn't it, as such?
Yeah.
So, which is quite good. So, so yeah, ask questions as you want to go along. Obviously, it's how it works on Zoom occasionally. So if there's too many, it gets a bit busy. But yeah. So as Peter said, I live at a place called Rare Green, which is famous, really, in the agricultural world for the home of Waring's Farm Buildings. You've heard of Waring's Farm Buildings, so that's what they make in our village as such. But yeah, I'm on the Fylde coast near Preston, and between Preston and Blackpool, really. So yeah, I'll just give you a bit of my background here, actually. So I've been working in the area between, well, in the northwest really, for about 30 years now, with dairy, beef, and sheep farmers. So and mainly nutrition, really, to be quite honest. And back in 1999, 2000, I started working with a lady called Josephine Scammell, who was from Somerset. We tragically lost Jo this year, but she was a real inspiration because she got me to start looking underneath the sod of soil when it came to herd health issues and stock issues and stuff like that. And so, you know, that was when I kind of started taking a lot more interest in soil, if you will. And then also with Dr. David Atherton at T&J, he's a big driver for mineral balance in soil. You know, has travelled the world quite a bit. And then I worked in New Zealand for a little while back in 2002, 2003. And there I spent a bit of time with a guy called John Baker. And he's quite famous in the direct drilling, no tillage world, because he developed the cross-slot drill. He was at Massey University, and he's actually a soil scientist, but probably one of the most worldwide known guys in direct drilling and conservation tillage. So I was very lucky to meet all these people, really, and John and Joe and David especially. So so that was good. So yeah, so I'm a big fan of soil health, animal nutrition, grassland utilisation. So I work with quite a lot of paddock grazers down here in Lancashire, and yeah, and I'm also the British Grassland Society Northwest Regional Rep as well. So yeah, so your area is, Peter, it goes, I presume, from Carlisle upwards, does it, up to Hadrian's Wall? Is that the direction of travel?
Yes, just the north east corner of Cumbria, just the yes, north of the A7, east of east of the A7, north of the A69.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So right. Okay. Yeah. So we've got a bit of altitude there, and quite a bit of rain, I've no doubt. So yeah, good. We've all got soil though, so that helps, doesn't it, as such? So I'll just do a bit of soil background, and like I say, we'll cover Herbal Leys as well. But we'll just do a bit of the background stuff about a living soil. Some people might have heard me do this before. And then a chunk about soil pH. That's an important factor. Would that be good, Peter? Is that okay?
That's fine. Yes, that's perfect.
Yeah. Herbal Leys, etc. And then some new ideas to look at as well. So this is a farm I was at the other week down in Shropshire. So slightly different territory, but all sorts of things going on here. Herbal Leys, clover, looking at soil structures and different stocking densities. So anyway, that's just an overview of some of the stuff I get to see, really, as such. So nice land, Shropshire. Gosh, yeah, totally different than it is in the north. They're still growing grass now, so unbelievable. So yeah, with soil, just flipping through this, soil is part of this cycle, and you'll have all seen this before, where soil, grass and cow or sheep or beef, it's all part of this intricate cycle. So what we do to our soil will affect our grass in terms of yield, quality, mineral balance, and that can affect our animals. So it can be herd health, sheep, you know, any type of mineral imbalance could come from the soil. To some extent, so could the nutrition, could come from the soil. And this is one of Joel's things, really. She worked in Australia with a lady called Pat Colby, and she said you should start feeding a herd of cows from the soil upwards. So you dig a hole in the ground, and then you start feeding the cows from the soil upwards. So it brings the whole scope of the whole thing into the arena, really, as such. So so that's an important factor, I think. And it must be right. apparently, a bit flippant this, but Starbucks say it is. They say a quality cup of coffee starts in the soil. So, so it must be right, yeah. So if you believe what Starbucks say, but there's loads of stuff about, you know, how important soil is. And to me, the importance of soil is it's your farm's greatest resource. You've all got different soils. We all have different soils. We all have different weathers to compete with, different systems, but your soil is your greatest resource. Peter, what type of soils have we got in the area? Is it a mix of everything then?
Yes, yeah. There's a sort of loams, clay loams. There's quite a bit of peat on the higher ground. Sort of gravelly in sort of on the lowland, but on the river basins.
Okay, so you've got a good mix of all sorts really and stuff. Yeah, right.
There's quite a bit of sandy stuff, sandy loams down towards Longtown. So we have that kind of real mixture of sandy loams through to clay loams with blacktop, and then peat. I think that's sort of, but most of them are quite slowly permeable, apart from the light sandy loams down towards Longtown.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So the thing about any soil, doesn't matter which one it is, whether it's a sand, silt, clay, whether it's a peat, it is a living environment. That's the thing I was, that underlying thing really, is soil is a living environment. You know, it is just a different entity on its own, but it is a living environment. And so we must always bear that in mind, whatever we do to soil, really, that it's a living thing. And a healthy soil is important to our environment as well, because it absorbs a lot of carbon, stores a lot of carbon. And I know that was something you brought up about, Pete. Was it about sequestration of carbon as well?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah. And I think it's a big relevant subject, is that obviously, you know, carbon sequestration is coming further up the agenda. We as an agricultural business absorb more carbon, I'm sure, than they give us credit for, or we do. We just got to stand our ground with this. We're a big part of the carbon solution, and we just need to stand our ground a little bit more with that, I think. So, but healthy soils are part of that mix. You know, we've got to make sure we're not abusing soils and wrecking them, otherwise they're not a part of the solution. So, you know, good healthy soils work because they're part of the environmental carbon sequestration. So it's a big thing. And I'm very simplistic. I am not a soil scientist. I am a bit of a soil enthusiast, really. But I think looking after soil is a bit like feeding a rumen in a cow, or any ruminant, really. It needs managing the same way, because soil is the plant's rumen. And, you know, if I affect a cow's rumen, for example, and give a cow acidosis, then the cow's going to tell me within 24 hours it's got a problem. But I can give soil acidosis, like drive its pH down, and I won't know about it for months and months, until crops don't yield as well and soil doesn't work just as well. So I think that, you know, but anyway, it's the same principle really. You're feeding the soil to feed the plant. It's the same thing like feeding the rumen to feed the cow. And that in a nutshell is, you know, that both living environments. And these on the right are some soils actually right up in Orkney, up in northwest Scotland there, northeast Scotland, sorry, up on Orkney. And this was some healthy soil compared with not just healthy soil. And the one with the guy holding with the black and white top there, that's a nice healthy soil. But that was done because in a way, this drops into Herbal Ley conversation a little bit, although we can't all grow red clover. But this was red clover ley compared with the same field without a red clover ley in it. It was really friable, that one on the right, compared with this one on the left. Completely different type of soil. And it was the same soil, just had a different crop in it. And so a Herbal Ley had made a big difference to the structure and the way that soil worked. So, but that was red clover. So, so what is a healthy soil, or what's a healthy soil made out of? And it's basically mineral. So soil has got sand, silt and clay in it. So that's your mineral part of it, which is made up of phosphorus, magnesium, calcium, etc. And that's about 46-47% of your soil makeup. And then the other part of it is your air. And you need air in soil. We all know that, but air is vital, because most of the stuff that lives in the top 5 or 6 inches of your soil needs air. It's aerobic. And if we're short of air, we have an anaerobic soil, which doesn't work as well as an aerobic soil, by a tune of 4 times, basically. So air is really key. Sorry, yeah?
4 times.
Okay. And then water, something we're not short of. And and I don't know what the average waterfall will be in your area, Peter, but water is important. 22-24% of your soil should be water. Now, we might argue the fact that when it rains a lot and you get a couple of inches in a day or 4 inches in a day, your soil might be nearly 100% water. But basically, 22-24% is what you want. So, yeah. What is the average rainfall up in that neck?
It's over 1,000 millimeters. I'm not sure exactly. It's over 1,000 in that area.
Yeah. It's normally over 1,200 mil.
Is it? Right, okay. So you're on, yeah, just sort of 60 mil, yeah, 60 inch, right, okay, yeah, wow. So yeah, you're getting quite a lot of water. Yeah. It's interesting, for every inch of rain, you know, just a pub fact that you might never need again, but every inch of rain on every acre of land puts about 100 tonne of water on. So if you have 1 inch of rain in a night, you've put 100 tonnes of water on every acre of your land, or 247. 247 tonne on a hectare, if you will. So it's quite a big thing. So if you remember the floods back in Kendal and Carlisle, which is what, 3-4 years ago at Christmas time, just before or after Christmas, wasn't it? They had somewhere in the region of 12 inches in 24 hours. So they had like 1,200 tonne of water dropped on every acre of land in a day. So frightening, isn't it, the amount of water that drops on some of our ground, really. So anybody have an idea what the next bit of your soil should be made out of? What's the important part of the next bit? It's not a big bit, it's only like 5-7%.
Okay, isn't it?
So yeah, I couldn't just hear it, but it's organic matter. So your soil won't function without organic matter. So that's like, well, it's basically food for your biological activity in your soil. It's rotted down roots, it's any decay off the top, so bits of plant that are rotting down. Organic matter is that, basically. So and organic matter is key. It's the one that, if you want to ask the question, what's the biggest threat to soils in the world, and it's the lack of organic matter. So organic matter in soils certainly is a problem. If you're in the arable world, organic matter is your friend. There's a lot of organic matter on arable soils in the UK that are less than 3%, quite a lot under 2%, and they're really struggling with those soils. So if you plough a field every year, year after year after year, you oxidise carbon, which is organic. Well, the parental element of it is organic matter. So, or organic matter is carbon. So carbon and organic matter full hand in hand, really. So it's the one that everybody's watching. If you don't have organic matter, you don't get structure to your soil. It just goes like a brick. It doesn't drain very well. It doesn't hold water very well. It's pretty useless. It doesn't work without organic matter. So, but in your part of the world, like my part of the world, it's not a major problem. But in fact, you can have too much. So yeah. So has anybody measured organic matters in the group or not?
Yeah, I'm getting around about 9% on 9 to 10% on most of our farm.
Okay. Yeah. So that's pretty typical, yeah, for your net and a bit for mine as well. So if I go up towards the Pennines, up in the Ribble Valley, I'll get 9-10%, quite a bit. So I'm not short of organic matter by any means. What I've got to watch with it though is it doesn't keep climbing. So if it was 9% today, and say it went to 19% in 5 years' time, then it's climbed. Now, that is necessarily not a good thing. That means your soil's not breaking the organic matter down. So the higher doesn't always mean better. Organic matter is continuously breaking down all the time. So if it starts climbing a lot, then there's something wrong. The soil's not breaking the organic matter down, so it's got compacted or something like that. So that's where organic matters are important to know about. Good thing to test if you're a bit unsure about a soil. Not a bad thing, you know. So it's not a bad thing. I've just put these 2 slides up because this is what happens to soils when you haven't got enough water. These are my grass growth rates for the northwest. So this is my grass growth, people that measure grass between where I am at Preston and we go up to Kendal. And you can see here this year we lost a lot of grass growth in May and June. That seems an awful long time ago, and we got fields looking like this where it started to dry out. So without water, I can't operate. I run out of grass growth. And then on the right, obviously, I've got this compacted zone here, and you know, that's what happens when I haven't got enough air in soil. I get compacted, wet, sod soils that just, soil compaction just not good at all, really. So the importance of these two is important. So I think the other thing, just quickly to, we'll just talk about a few of these facets in a minute, is consider soil in terms of mineral, biological and structural. It's not just a soil sample, it's not just pH, P and K, it's more than that. It's biology, it's structure, it all ties together. And if you get one of these facets wrong, your soil starts to collapse. So it's an important thing to just look at, really. So digging soils are good. I'll flip through these a little bit. These are digging soils in hedge lines in the middle of fields. These are quite good. You can see on the second left, that's from the hedgerow. If you're unsure about your soil, how well it's operating, then digging in the hedgerow tells you what soil would like to be. It's slightly different, but it wants to be, it's got lots of organic matter in the hedgerow. It's very poor, it drains reasonably well because of the deep rooting from the hedge and the plants that grow within it. Whereas you go to the same soil in the middle of the field and you get this one, which is second from the right, if you will. That is the same soil as the one in the middle and second left, and it's more compact. It has just been ploughed, and when you plough a field, all the structure collapses and it starts to repair itself. So after 4 or 5 years, this field, which I'm indicating here, will improve and start to look maybe slightly more like that, not totally. So, but if you want to know what your soil structures are like, your health's like, have a dig in the hedge, or if you haven't got hedges up to the, well, not up to the wall where the sheep have been stuck because they'll compact it, but anywhere on a boundary of a soil, of a field, will tell you a bit of, how good a structure can be. So, yeah, so it's not. Has anybody done that at all? Anybody ever look in the hedge line and seen? Yeah.
I
good
did
thing
that 2 weeks ago on a farm. It was amazing difference. It was an arable farm in near Thirsk, and the middle of the farm was very structural. It had been arable cropping for a year and year, but it was amazing the difference. We're just back by the hedgerow, the soil structurally and the organic matter. It was it was quite interesting just seeing the comparison.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. It's just a comparison. It's a rack of the eye. You can see it, you can grade it, and you're not going to get your soil right at the bottom of a hedge because it's not farmed, is it? But it gives you an idea of what your soil, maybe if it's completely different in the middle of the field, maybe time to look at, am I doing something slightly wrong, maybe? So it's just a good thing to do if you're a bit unsure about what your soil wants to look like, because it's the same soil, same rain, same weather, just different environment a little bit. So it's not a bad thing to do. And just going back onto that thing, one of the big things I do with soils is actually smell them, so if they smell nice and earthy, that's good. If they smell of nothing or they smell rancid, that's bad. That means it's compact. It isn't going to break farmyard manure down very well. It isn't going to break slurry down. It isn't going to do, if it smells rancid, it's not working properly. And that's another thing. So smelling soil, it's a bit like smelling cheese, I suppose. But, soil smells are good, or soil aroma is a good barometer, really, just to work off. So, yeah, so that's not a bad thing. Soil structure will affect the palatability of your grass that it's growing in it. It'll affect the grass quality and yield. It can affect protein levels, energy levels in grass. So soil structure is important for that. Mineral profile of forages, I'll touch a bit about that later on. Breaks down manures better. I'll flip through these a bit. And it improves nutrient uptake, phosphorus, nitrogen, etc. So it is a good thing. So, and better grass growth. Where we measure grass, if we've got a better soil conditions, same field, same type of soil, but different structures or health of soil, then it can make a difference of 3 to 5 tonne of dry matter per hectare, which is a lot of grass, really. So it's important to look at. And soil runoff, we don't always get. This is an extreme case after an extreme weather event, and it's not something we want to see this, but this is soil runoff of field. But compacted soils can lead to 50% more runoff than an uncompacted soil. So healthy soils are a good focus point, and also compacted soils can give off more nitrous oxide as well. So that's a greenhouse gas. So it's one we've got to be aware of at the same time. So biology, looking at soil biology, obviously the probably most important bit of soil as well, and these are some guys digging for worms. in the heat this summer when it was 30 odd degrees apparently. So, but they were looking for worms. So biology is a good thing to focus on with your soils. But it's like I say before, it's a bit like feeding a cow. It's been calculated that 1 teaspoon of soil can contain 1 billion different microscopic organisms of different species, many of which we know nothing about. I mean, let's be honest, we know more about things that live at the bottom of the ocean than we do live in our soils. So it is one area we are still learning more and more about, really. And this is something on the next slide here. I've got a layer of soil in the middle with grass growing in it, and I've got a cow at the top and a cow at the bottom. But basically, it indicates that really even people that don't have livestock are livestock farmers, because underneath every acre or hectare of land, it should have the equivalent stocking rate underneath it than what's walked on the top of it. Somebody told me it wants to be at least 1 cow's weight per acre underneath the soil in living matter that there is walking on the surface. So even if you're an arable farmer, you don't have any livestock on at all, and most people are arable are starting to look at having livestock again, but it's a good thing. But if you have no livestock at all on the top of the ground or grazing or whatever, and you just grow crops, you have actually got livestock underneath the ground. But it's a very complex web, we know that, but it's a good thing. And just that thing there about rumen pH, which I mentioned before, you know, the target rumen pH is about 6.2, and really that's kind of the ideal soil pH as well, very similar. So it's a good synergy to work off. If I drop that rumen pH below 5.5, that cow is going to struggle. If I drop a soil below 5.5, that soil is going to start to struggle if it's an average type of loam, if you will. So, yeah. Not okay. So 5 to 7% is organic matter. Like I say, if you've got 9%, don't worry. If you've got 15%, don't over worry. If it keeps going up, then I want to measure it. But organic matter is important because it makes soil flexible, gives it structure, helps with water drainage, provide plant nutrients. I'll fly through these. It's soil life's food source and a home, so it's good. And without organic matter, soil is doomed. Fact. This is what happened to the American Dust Bowl effect. They lost soil structure and completely wrecked it because they virtually farmed out or over-farmed it, and it lost its organic matter, it lost its structure, and it all blew away. So from history, we've learned not to wreck our soil organic matter. So yeah. So yeah, has anybody ever looked for worms in the soil at all, or? Yeah.
Well, it's quite interesting. I was doing the comparing the hedgerow to the centre, the middle of the field, and the difference in worms by the hedgerow, under the hedgerow, and the lack of worms that were in the field. Yeah, quite a common situation that. But yeah, I mean that's a good thing about looking in the hedgerow, because worms are very temperature dependent. So if it's the same time of year, so if you're doing it in the spring and you look in the hedgerow and there's loads of worms in there, which there will be more anyway, because you're not treading it as much, etc. But if there's none at all in the middle of the field, there's something wrong a little bit. Like you've got a lot of moles, but they're a good sign as well. But yeah, worms are a good indicator to some extent of how well a soil is biologically, because they're the tiger of the jungle, apart from the moles. So the top of the food chain in soil, and remember, soil is one big jungle. It's like everything's eating everything else, and worms are at the top of that tree, apart from, like I say, moles, etc. But so if you've got worms, you'll have a lot of other things like fungi, bacteria in there, enzymes, etc. So they're a good indicator of what soil health is going on in there. They move a lot of soil, 40 tonne a year. A good population of worms will move 40 tonne of soil per acre per year. So you don't have to, fill them up with diesel and feed them over time. They're good natural cultivators. So that's, how good worms are for soil health. They shift a phenomenal amount of soil. So my guys in New Zealand would tell me that a good population of worms would move as much as you would if you ploughed 6 inches, and that's 2,000 tonne an acre. So whether that's true or not, I don't know, but they really rated soil health on their worm counts as well. So excrement's very nutritious, so it's very, very nutritious as worm excrement, good fertilizer really. So, and I look for 6 to 10 worms per cubic foot of soil roughly in the topsoil, so that's a good indicator. So that's something else to look for. Aerators, many people use aerators and stuff like that up there. Yeah.
Yeah, aerators are okay. They're not the magic bullet, but if you've got compacted soil, worm life, struggling a little bit, if you put a lot of slurry on land, if you maybe have a surface compaction, using an aerator is good if you've got a deeper one. And the whole idea of using aerators and subsoil is to get air in there, which will stimulate the soil life a little bit. It's nothing else. It'll help with drainage as well, but really it's to help stimulate soil life. So using this type of kit's good, but it's not a magic bullet. I don't prescribe everybody use it. It's if you need it, and never do any machinery like any land work like this, obviously, if it's too wet, because you'll make it worse than it was before you started. So so yeah, aerating subsoil is not a bad thing really. So if you need it. So, but sometimes you're told that an aerator will fix everything, or a subsoil or a pan buster will fix everything. It won't. It's something else going on in the soil as well, but it can help in the short term because using this type of kit. Do many people use these at all in the group or not? Yeah. Soil sampling. So would we all do a lot of soil sampling up there? Yeah.
Yeah, quite a few farms have done that, and
yeah.
we've done it under catchment sensitive farming.
Brilliant. Yeah. So soil sampling is important, obviously, and really it needs to be done now because it's part of the soil protection policy. Every if you put fertiliser certainly on land, you should do soil sampling every minimum 5 years, kind of getting that way now. So it'll become further up the agenda. This will be mentioned more, I'm sure, as we go into Elms territory and that type of thing. But yeah, in Ireland it's compulsory now. It's at least with I think it's every 4 to 5 years there, it must be done. So if you're putting fertiliser on any ground. So yeah, soil sampling is important. And you can have all sorts of different soil samples, in-depth ones, standard ones like the one on the right here. These are some of the ones that we do all sorts of soil samples. But even the basic one, which is the one on the right, which is pH, pK and magnesium, is a real good steer on what you might want to do with your soil as such. And soil samples don't have to be too complicated as well. I work on the 80-20 rule. So if you think of the soil sample on the right, which has got pH, P, K, magnesium, well, if you just focused on the, if you will, 25% of it, which is the pH, you can fix 80% of your soil's problems, if you will, because pH is a real driver for soil structure, how well it takes nutrients up, etc. So pH is a good one to focus on. So yeah, I presume we get all sorts of pH readings up there, do we, as such? Has anybody got any really low ones at all? Or?
The thing is, some of the more sort of rush pasture areas, it can be quite acidic.
Yeah, which is fair enough. I'll skip through this one. So soil pH is a real good basic of soil management or grassland management. Soil pH is key. We've been doing it a long time, as you can see on the right with the horse and the cart there. But soil pH is a key, and it's important to remember pH 6 to 6.5 is good, but if you're on mossy, darker soils, it's going to be more like 5, 6, 5, 5. So slightly different soils. If you've got higher upland, which is real peaty soil, you're going to struggle to get towards 6. So if you're at 5, 6, that's acceptable for a darker soil. But if you're on a clay, sand, silt loam, 6 to 6.5 is really good. I start to get excited when we get below 5.8, but there you go. So. And it is logarithmic. It is the single most important chemical property of soil. But if you have a pH of 6, it's 10 times more acidic than 7. So this is just a factor number here. And if you have a pH of 5, it's 100 times more acidic than 7. So you can see it accelerates at some pace. If you have a pH of 4, and I have got soil pHs out there of 4.2, then that is 1,000 times more acidic than 7. So it's exponential. It goes off the curve. So in a nutshell, every point is significant. So if you've got a 5.5 soil pH and you're on a kind of sandy silt clay loam, if you will, then it really wants to be towards 6. And you could be, in effect, 50 times more acidic than 7. So if you can get it to 5.8, that's made a huge difference in it. If you can get it to 5.7, you've made a huge difference. 5.8, 5.9, so it's a bit exponential like that. So it is important. But the important bit about pH is its effect on all the bacteria, the fungi, time's pressing, so I'll not go through a lot of this, but if you have an acidic soil, you have a more fungal activity in your soil and not enough bacteria. If you have a too high soil pH, you have more bacteria and not enough fungal. So it's a balance, and at a target pH you get a mixture of all of it. Worms like a nice balanced target pH, and you'll use fertilizer and manure a lot better as well. So that's the effect of pH. The other thing to remember about pH quickly is pH is a measure of hydrogen, but the elements that offset pH or make your soil pH what it is mainly are, and they're not all down to one, but there is ones that make a huge difference to it, is your soil calcium level. This is why we use calcium lime. This is why we used to use seashells, that type of thing in the past. Anything with calcium in it, we've used slag in the past, haven't we, from the steelworks? That's quite high in calcium. So they all help affect the soil pH. So calcium's a big driver for your pH, as is magnesium, the other one. So these two are the main ones we think about when we're applying lime. We have a calcium-based lime, or we might use a dolomitic lime, which is a magnesium-based lime, but that has still got some calcium in it. So they're the main drivers of our pH, really, that we apply to land to improve the soil pH. But there's two other ones that affect your soil pH, and you'll get this a little bit on certainly big dairy units. Will be potassium, because a lot of slurry is very rich in potassium, and that can artificially push pHs up. And the other one is sodium. So most soils are short of sodium, unless you live right by the coast or the Isle of Man. They have higher levels of sodium. But those four elements do influence your soil pHs. So yeah. So what type of lime would most people use, do you think? Many of you used predominantly just calcium lime going forward, or?
Calcium all the time.
Yeah, that's it. That's the way. Unless you really need magnesium lime. I mean, in the north and the west, really, we are predominantly short of calcium, and like I said, that's an important element, really. And the calcium is the only one that really affects your structure. It'll make it flocculate, open out, make it more porous. So calcium is one for really affecting your soil structure. So it's important for biology. It's important for clover growth, palatability in the grass. Calcium affects your palatability. If you're short of calcium, your palatability of your grass isn't going to be good. But like I say, I mentioned before, soil structure, flocculation, it's the only element of the four really that has a major key effect on your soil structure, and that is calcium. So it's a really important one, but it's one of the four. The other three do affect your soil pH, and it's having a balance of them all. And just going back to that previous slide, this is the thing I've got in these numbers just behind calcium: 68% calcium to 12 of magnesium, and you always want to have more calcium than magnesium. Sometimes 4, 5, 6 to 1, so 5 to 6 parts calcium to 1 of magnesium. Some people run at 8 to 1, but you've always got more calcium than magnesium. And it's, if you've got 2 to 1, you've not enough calcium. You need more calcium if you've got a ratio of 2 to 1. So it really affects soil structure, so it's a good thing to know.
James, can I ask you a question then, just about magnesium? So we're occasionally seeing magnesium levels at index 4, say. At what point is magnesium suddenly going to be too high, or is it just to do with that relationship to calcium?
Yeah, a bit of both, really. It will become too high. The trouble with magnesium, when it's its ratio to some extent, because there's a lot of magnesium there, it's probably robbing the, and I haven't got a picture of this, it's robbing the sites around the soil particles. So if there's too much magnesium there, it's taking up exchange sites for the calcium. So yeah, it's the ratio, really. This is why you want like more calcium particles, calcium elements attached to the soil particles than you do magnesium, if you will. So if you are getting very, very high magnesium levels, you are probably compromising your calcium. So yeah, it's calcium, therefore, to push the magnesium off, really, to outcompete it. Yeah. So that's the key thing. I think with your standard soil sample, it gives you an index, doesn't it? You know, 5, 6 magnesiums. If you're getting a bit concerned about that, do a more in-depth soil sample and try and get what we call a CEC and a base saturation of your calcium and magnesium, because that's actually what's around your soil particles, if you will. And that'll be a good way forward. So that's where, if you're starting to see them, because you might actually not necessarily have a high magnesium, you might have high magnesium, but you might not have a low calcium. It might be something else that's taking it up, might be potassium or something like that. So if you're getting a bit concerned about that, do one full detail one just to give you an idea of which way it's taking you a little bit. So, yeah. Is that all right, Chris? Yeah. So but if you are getting these high magnesium, remember, if you are getting these high magnesiums, you could have more problems with grass staggers because the availability of magnesium in the grass might not be just as good because it'll make soil really tight. And when it does magnesium, and if soil gets really tight, it's very reluctant to let go of nutrients into the grass. So you could have more grass staggers problems, even though you've got a higher magnesium index. Your grass will not be taking it up because the soil's that tight, it's not letting it go. So yeah, it does answer quite a few health issues sometimes, does understanding this calcium magnesium ratio really as such. So this is a slide.
Just one thing, we have high levels of molybdenum in this area. How does that fit into all those?
Yeah, so molybdenum is an important. It's a good question, is that, Colin? Yeah, molybdenum is a bit of a problem down here as well. Obviously, because are you having problems with copper, etc., that type of thing?
Yeah, copper and probably selenium as well.
Yeah, right. Yeah, molybdenum is a very, very reactive trace element and in the rumen. So as soon as it gets into the rumen, it disassociates copper. So it sticks around the copper molecule, and so it doesn't get absorbed by the animal because it makes it into a large particle. So yeah, now where does this happen? So all right, certain areas have high levels of molybdenum. So there's not a lot you can always do about that. But you will influence your molybdenum levels partly a little bit by your pHs. So what I'd say if you're living in a high molybdenum area is you don't want to be pushing your pHs too high because that could increase the uptake of molybdenum. That's the one I've always watched as well. If even with this farm here, which I've got a picture of here, if we say put a lot of lime on at once, you should always limit your lime applications to, in old money, 2 tonne to the hectare. Partly the reason, because if you put 3 tonne on, you change the pH of the soil so quickly that it actually releases loads of molybdenum, and you'll struggle to get any sheep in land the following year. So the higher the pH and the big shift, if you shift your pH really quickly, then you will increase your uptake of molybdenum in grass. So yeah, so with this, it's a bit of a double-edged sword is the molybdenum question. You don't want your pHs like, if you've got a real molybdenum issue, you probably don't want your pHs towards 6.5, but probably 6 or just there is just probably enough because you'll keep your molybdenum in check. But that helps. But but soil structure, if your soil structures are compacted and tight, a bit sodden, etc., then your molybdenum levels will also be high in them because grass, when it gets stressed, it gets hold of easy nutrients, and molybdenum's dead easy to get hold of, so it'll take up more molybdenum in place of something like potassium, actually, I think it is. So yeah, molybdenum is a problem one, but it's where we live. We need molybdenum, but usually we're oversupplied in it. You can't grow clover without molybdenum. Parts of New Zealand, they actually put molybdenum on the ground because you couldn't grow clover without it. But in our country, we really got a lot of it. So yeah. Go on, Colin. Sorry.
There's quite a few within the group been using quite a bit of gypsum.
Yeah.
It probably doesn't alter the pH that much, but it's free P and K.
Yeah.
Plus, I think it's helping to flocculate the ground a lot more.
Yeah, it will.
Because it's not been used for a long time.
Yeah, I think gypsum, if you've got a reasonably good pH or your pH is within the scale and you're definitely short of calcium, gypsum is a good option because it doesn't affect the soil pH, but it does add calcium to the soil structure. But the other thing about it, the sulfate will react with the magnesium and you'll get it coming out, you'll reduce the magnesium level a bit because it comes out of magnesium sulfate. So it will help correct the balance. But again, like anything in life, be careful of the balance. Don't keep using gypsum year after year after year because you might overload your soil with sulphur and you might overload your calcium.
Do you think it's possible up here now with the small amounts about, you'd have to use an awful lot before you start to do that because there's nothing coming out of industry and factory chimneys anymore, is there? And we're so far away from towns and cities, even traffic.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, no, you're probably a long way to go. The best way of assessing your sulphur, I know we've drifted a bit on, but the sulphur is a is obviously a big topic in the paper a lot, grow more grass, put sulphur on. But I do now, I had one yesterday where the sulphur level on a dairy farm was too high. They've been using ammonium sulphate. I know it's not gypsum, but it's the same sulphate, it's the same thing. Their sulphate level was too high. They've been using ammonium sulphate for quite a number of years. And sulphate or sulphur in grass, in silage, creates a problem. It locks up copper and affects molybdenum, etc. So you've got to be careful. Now, the best way of assessing your sulphur level is to do a forage sample. In soil, it's quite useless measuring sulphur in soil, but if you can measure the sulphur level in your grass, then it tells you, roughly where your sulphur level is really. So it's a good, dead easy thing to do. So, and most, you can get a mineral sample of your forage done quite easily nowadays. So it's a good way of assessing that. Yeah, I take your point with molybdenum. It's one we've got to live with. It usually affects lambs, doesn't it? Mid-August, we have this big flush of new grass. We get a lot of molybdenum with it, but your structures will affect it a little bit as well. So, yeah, I just put this slide up here. On the left, I've got one. It's one big field, is this? And on the right, we did a pH program, and we did some P&K work on this land as well. And on the other part, we didn't do anything with it. This is for the following year. And you can see the difference it made in a field. It made a real difference to just getting the pH right, and also the P&K, actually, to be quite honest. And it was a dead simple bit. It wasn't really putting more nitrogen on. It was just literally pH, P&K. So it's made a real impact on that farm and that field, particularly over a couple of years. It took a couple of years to do this. And like I said, this farm gets upwards nearly 100 inches of rain a year now. So it's a wet farm as well, but made a huge difference to it. So that was what was good. Yeah, I'll skip through this because time's pressing on. Herbal Leys. So, has anybody grown Herbal Leys or not, or what's the experience with Herbal Leys?
Tried. Heard.
Have people tried it or not?
No.
No.
Generally, we haven't, but we're kind of interested in it.
Okay, yeah, okay. So Herbal Leys, I haven't just got a mixed split here actually for you. Yeah, so Herbal Leys are obviously becoming in the press quite a bit more. Regenerative agriculture a little bit as well, I suppose. That comes into the equation. But yeah, Herbal Leys are an interesting topic. I've done a little bit of work in Scotland. I'll show you some of these. Herbal Leys add a whole new dimension to soil structures if you can grow them. I think the thing about Herbal Leys is it's getting the right kind of mixture for your area, because a lot of Herbal Leys have been developed for the Cotswolds where it's dry, and we don't tend to live in that type of territory. I mean, the advantage of Herbal Leys is, unless you have got a low rainfall, obviously they'll fit again. Herbal Leys have got a very complex root architecture, so they can take up a lot of moisture where other plants can't get it. If you were just growing a monoculture perennial ryegrasses, Herbal Leys make a huge difference to the amount of moisture. They're more tolerant to drought, and also the trace element uptake of a Herbal Ley is significant, really. So, there is advantages to them. They're not. Are they easy to grow? They're not as easy as they think they are to grow. But there are now more options for the north, if you will. So yeah, so they're worth thinking about. Don't go overboard on them. They are worth thinking about. But where they work successfully, and this is a guy down near me, he grows Herbal Leys for his grazing platform, where he grows plantain and chicory in his grazing platform, and it works very well for his cows. So they are possibly worth thinking about if you've got the right type of land, really. Just an aside, I did some work up in, well, these are various pictures here. I've got a few pictures here from Settle in the Yorkshire, which has got plantain and chicory in it. You can see the Yorkshire Dales in the background there, and on the right here I've got a picture of a plantain plant. You can see the root depth on that, it's pretty good. And plantain's quite a nice one in the north. It grows pretty well. It's quite robust to grazing. You can overgraze it, but it's a bit better to overgraze than, or less prone to overgrazing than, say, chicory, if you will. So it's not bad. But on the left here, I've got a bit of a mineral breakdown of some work I did in Scotland with a field, and it was one particular field that we split into 2 lots of Herbal Leys and 2 lots of grass, and I've measured the calcium and all the minerals that are in the actual crop growing in it. And a Herbal Ley gave me, from the top, if you will, it gave me 15% more calcium in a segment of the Herbal Ley. It gave me 23% more phosphorus, 38% more magnesium. So you can see there, the only 2 elements or 3 elements it was a bit lower in was manganese, which is a bit of one we've got to watch, and selenium. It was a bit lower in selenium than it was the Herbal Ley compared with the grass. But in a nutshell, most of the elements it was supplying at a better level. So, we were quite pleased with that, really, or it was quite an eye-opener, really, that Herbal Leys do draw up more trace elements. So they kind of have got a place, really, a little bit, as such. How tough they are depends on your rainfall, how you graze them. I think with Herbal Leys, you're better off trying to graze them in controlled manner. So maybe paddock graze them a little bit. If you can, set stocking them, it won't really work. You've got to graze them and let them rest, graze them and rest them. So the paddock grazing system for Herbal Leys, whether it's a long-term rest or a short-term rest, it just needs grazing, resting, grazing, resting somehow. So that's where Herbal Leys really do come into their own. So Herbal Leys, did I ask that question? I probably might have done. Anybody tried them at all?
Not yet.
Not yet. Yeah.
Hello.
Well.
Hello.
Hiya.
Hello. Yeah, I see the copper's 44.7% more. Is that an issue with Texel sheep?
No, because it wasn't an over high copper level anyway. So it's one to watch. So the average level in the grass, for example, is about 6 milligrams per kilo. This is in percentage, remember, sorry.
Yeah.
So, the average grass level is about 6 milligrams per kilo. So I couldn't make the numbers back out. So I think it got it to about 9 or 10. Well, with Texel sheep, I think you've got to take them to about 11 or 12 before it's a real issue.
Okay.
Memory. So it was a percentage shift, really. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
No, that's fine. It's a good question. It's a good point, is that? Yeah. So, because Texel sheep are dead easy at falling over with copper, aren't they? So, yeah. So they're all percentage shifts. So, and if you like graphs, that was the graph. So, there you go. Similar type of thing. So, from a trace element point of view, Herbal Leys did win every time, I must admit. So, we're, quite pleased with that. Now, from a soil structure point of view, this is another trial I did on another field. And this wasn't in Scotland. This was near a place called Clitheroe, and we did a same field, and we put a Herbal Ley in one half and a non-herbal in the other. And on the left, you can see the bit we haven't got Herbal Ley in it, and on the right, the one we did. And the soil structure was different. It definitely made a difference to the soil structure in the Herbal Ley. It was cracking it a little bit more. You can see there's slightly more vertical cracks in this Herbal Ley soil on the right than there is horizontal ones on the left hand one. It was more slabby, whereas my Herbal Ley part in the same field was certainly a better structure to it, if you will. And this had been in the ground for now, it'll be going into this will be its 3rd year it's been in the ground. So it's had a bit of time to affect the soil structure. But yeah, on the left, it was a pretty typical soil to what it was before we started, actually. Whereas actually we'd had a bit of Herbal Ley in there. It made a bit of a difference to the soil structure. So, and the cattle on this field always grazed the Herbal Ley part off first, I must admit. So it did make a difference that way. So palatability, it was certainly better. So they grazed it a lot. You could see when we closed up that paddock for this winter, where they definitely grazed down the Herbal Ley part, and they left the other part. They hadn't just grazed the other part down just as well. So yeah, it does make a difference to the soil structure as well. So yeah. So I mean, these are very anecdotal observations with Herbal Leys, and these are ones I just play around with really on certain fields. And these Herbal Leys were made up of partly red clover, white clover. So in a nutshell, I had like 30% clovers in the Herbal Ley, and then I'd have a perennial ryegrass in it, a couple of them, and we'd have Timothy, Cocksfoot, and I think these are good as well. People go on about Herbal Leys as well, but actually sometimes having a mixed species of grasses is good. So cocksfoot's a mix, another grass, but it's just a different species than perennial ryegrass. Timothy's another one. A fescalonium is another good type of grass to have in there. And then we had chicory, plantain, this herbal ley. So there was quite a mixed selection. Not as complex as some of the ones that are growing in the south of the country, but you know, yeah, so it was a mixed selection. And even within the grasses part of it, the cocksfoot, very deep rooting plant. New varieties are a bit more palatable. We've gone off cocksfoot in the years gone by because it's been stalky and rushy and not that. But the new varieties are a lot better. So cocksfoot has a place. It's got a deep structure. It can help with soil structure. So yeah, so there's lots of different options. But the clovers are great. Don't underestimate clovers. They're going to reduce your nitrogen reliance. And if you can grow reds, and we can't all grow reds. I mean, we put red into this particular field here. Some survived, some didn't. So you know, but the whites certainly help. So it's getting the right combination, really. I don't think we've just cracked it yet, but we're kind of getting there with that, really, as such. So yeah. So yeah, that's that's Herbal Leys, really, to some extent. But I think, like I said, these are in near Settle, near Skipton there, and like I say, if you can paddock graze and better in grazing situ, really, no doubt about it. So, but yeah, the mineral balance is quite key. And then the other one I've just looked at a few times this last couple of years, really, has been covering up farmyard manure heaps. So if you've got farmyard manure, on the right, I've got a guy here we've been covering it up with a silage sheet, and it rots it down quite quickly. It ferments it, really, in a nutshell. Slightly going against convention a little bit, but what we found is, and I know this one's in a shed, we found it breaks down a lot quicker the straw breaks down. So Malcolm, who does this in this shed out of his beef a lot, so he literally takes his beef out in the spring, chucks them out, he heaps all these farmyard manure up, we cover it with a sheet, and the sheet itself, the one reason it breaks down quicker is because it's not losing nitrogen all the time, it's trapping the nitrogen under the sheet. And then there's obviously a lot of straw in there. Well, if you trap the nitrogen with the straw, it's breaking the straw down a lot quicker, and we're finding that we're able to spread that nearly after first cut. It's broke down that much faster, and we're kind of making it into like a silage, if you will. It's like fermenting it instead of composting it. So that's just something that kind of playing around with at the moment to see how well it works, and it does seem to be working okay. And if it was a sheet, if it was a pile outside like it is on the left, if you covered it with a sheet, the rainwater wouldn't wash all the nutrients out of it either. So we're kind of trying to make farmyard manure work a bit better, if you will. So that's quite an interesting little project, really, at the same time. So yeah, so something else maybe to think about. I don't know. That could be another project for you. I don't know.
I think it's quite good with the reducing ammonia emissions, and as well as retaining the nitrogen. It's quite interesting here that it breaks down a lot quicker, breaking down the straw.
Yeah, and they reckon, I've got another company, they're a Dutch company actually, and they do this system, it's called Pekaski, which if you looked on the internet, Pekaski is a name for this type of thing. It's fermenting farmyard manure. And they will do trial work, and it's not really peer reviewed, it's their work, but they would claim that they reduce the organic matter loss by nearly 60%. Because if a soil's rotting down, a farmyard manure is rotting down and composted, it's releasing CO2 into the atmosphere all the time. If you trap it under a sheet, you don't lose the CO2. So they're maintaining, you're actually containing more organic, you've got less losses when you've covered it, which kind of does make sense. Yeah. So you'll have a higher level of organic matter remaining in that pile. And if you remember, feeding soil is feeding it carbon a lot of the time. Feeding it organic matter is carbon feeding the soil. So if I can preserve more of it and not lose it to the atmosphere, that cannot be a bad thing, really. So yeah, obviously there'll be things we've got to learn about, but it looks an interesting concept. Yeah. Yeah. And it's not too expensive. It's just an old second-hand plastic silo sheet, isn't it? And that's it.
You don't turn that pile of FYM once it after sort of so far through the sheeting up process.
No, I just leave it.
Just heaped up and left.
Yeah, and just cover it. Yeah. What we are doing this year, I'll be honest, is we're putting some enzyme on the straw yards at the same time. So as he's rebedding every week, we put once a week, we rebed them 3 times a week, but once a week we put a bit of an enzyme on it. And what we're doing that for, well, one, it helps reduce the smell in the shed when the cattle are in there. but two, when we come to taking it out and we put it in the pile, the enzyme in there will help break it down a little bit faster. So you won't lose the carbon, but it helps break the straw down a little bit quicker. So that's the next level we're taking it to. So, but yeah, no, we haven't turned it. We just leave it in a pile just like that. So, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So now you could, as well, to accelerate it again, you could put lime on it or something like that, and that accelerate it again, but we haven't got to that stage yet. We're just doing one thing at a time to see how we go.
Hydrated lime or just ordinary lime?
Just ordinary lime, agricultural
Right.
lime. Yeah. So, but yeah, the enzyme one's interesting because that'll break the straw down even quicker, we think. So that's good. So we'll see how we work with that. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, so that's me really, Peter. About an hour there. So think of soils as a living environment is my cliche, I suppose, or a final statement. People have heard me say that before, but it is a living thing, and everything you do to it, whether it's growing a herbal ley, whether it's covering farmyard manure, whether it's liming a field, whether it's doing whatever you do to it, you're always trying to encourage soil to be a living thing. So